Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Community Conversations. The Village Yuba-Sutter is proud to have another community conversation with community members who, like us, want to be the change that we want to see in the world. Tonight, Megan and I are hosting our local law enforcement leadership team. Megan?
Good evening, everyone, and thank you again for coming to our community conversations. We have very special guests with us tonight. We have Sheriff Brandon Barnes with us from Sutter County. We have Chief of Police Christian Sachs of Marysville. We have Yuba County Sheriff Wendell Anderson. We have Chief of Police of Wheatland, Damiean Sylvester, and we have Chief of Police of Yuba City, Rob Landon. So I got everybody's titles right. We welcome you, gentlemen, and we thank you very much for joining us this evening for this important conversation. And also, we'd like to thank Yuba College once again for being our host, and Crystal for being our technician. So thank you, gentlemen, and welcome.
And so one of the things we were talking about, we always do the meeting before the meeting, because most of you know who are watching this now that we're pretty comfortable with each other, Megan and I, and we really want people to kind of feel comfortable speaking here with us and about these topics that are difficult to have. We are all human. We make mistakes. We speak the way we speak. There won't be a whole lot of editing, so we're going to ask you to just give us grace. We've asked these gentlemen to just be as honest and transparent as they can. They love the communities that they serve, the communities that we all work in. So we are just so honored that they've come and agreed to be here and amidst very troubling times for our community and very sensitive times for our community. So again, we just thank you so much for your courage and for being here and for the service that you do provide for the community. So having said all that, we're going to jump in.
Okay. All right, so let's do this. So as everybody knows, most of the community knows that last year we came together in light of the George Floyd situation. We've actually been working on this conversation for about a year now, but due to life and different things taking place, and we had to postpone several times. So it's a blessing that we're able to sit here and do this now. But last year we came together with the same heart and mindset that as a country we witnessed an atrocity, and you gentlemen stood up with us. Me as just a community member and a Black woman with a Black family that was concerned about the situation and reached out to the community and said, let's march, let's do this. And our Chief of Police, Chief Sachs, Christian Sachs, he stood up and said, I want to join you. And from there, you gentlemen joined us. And so yesterday we got the verdict. We weren't expecting that when we decided to have this conversation. We didn't know the trial. We knew the trial was going on, but we didn't know we would have a verdict at this time. And the officer was found guilty across the board, all three counts of guilty. So I think what would be the best first question is, what's your reaction to that? And anybody can jump in.
I'll jump in.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Rob. I think from all the information I have, the verdict that the jury handed down was just. I think it was deserving. I think that his actions were not the actions of a reasonable police officer under those circumstances. And I think he should face his punishment for that. And that's just my feeling on the whole situation.
And I would agree with that. I think that that's the first step toward accountability. It's not the end all for all our calls for equal, everything equal under justice and everybody being treated the same and everybody respecting each other. I think that this is a step in the right direction, but it's only a step, and we need to continue to make progress in taking care of all the underlying issues as well.
That's right.
Yeah, and I would agree with both Damien and Rob. I think, when, a year ago when we saw that video, nationally, and, it didn't matter what walk of life you were from. It didn't matter what your job was, whether you were, a peace officer or, some other profession. Everybody looked at that and knew it wasn't right. And I think the results of the trial bared that out. And, I think it's, like Rob said, it's a step in the right direction. We know there's a lot more strides that we need to make in terms of how we serve our community, but that's a good start. and a good talking point to get us going.
Yeah, and I concur with everything that they just said. And while nothing could bring Mr. Floyd back, his family, is without him forever now. Yeah, but I guess, and one of you quoted, I'm quoting one of you from Facebook, so it was not in vain. And I think it's a building block, right? And we have those bad apples, and we have to seed them out. And I think everyone here is in favor of that, and our justice system is able to do that if we allow it to work like the process is supposed to work.
Excellent words from everybody, and they all took the words out of my mouth. I mean, it was refreshing. I think it was it came back quick. It was one of those things but it was refreshing to see the justice system work the way that it's supposed to work. And, there is strides to still make. It is a step in the right direction, like, my counterparts here have talked about. And, we're on the road to accountability. And, it'll be exciting to see where we go from here and how we continue to build on those building blocks as we move forward, because there's a lot of, great work ahead of us. And, we just got to have the right people in place to make those things happen.
Absolutely. So go ahead.
I'm sorry, Megan. I was just going to say, I think that, something I was talking to one of my friends about today in regards to the anxiety around waiting for that verdict to be read. And I know I cried for about 20 minutes once the verdict was read. And I felt like I had been holding my breath, waiting, hoping, praying that justice, that accountability would occur. And I just stopped myself from saying justice, because justice means that he'd still be alive if things were just. But accountability means that someone's being held accountable for this man losing his life in such a horrific manner. But there was so much trauma for people in the community around even just waiting for that verdict. Even the fact that people knew that there was a chance that there would not be accountability caused anxiety for folks. And I think that yesterday was that day. And I remember having a conversation. In fact, Megan and I had a conversation, and we were just wiped out emotionally just around the release of, oh my God, like it happened, like someone was actually held accountable for the death of this Black man. And so despite seeing all that evidence, despite everyone, I don't know anyone who really didn't know about this or hadn't seen it, despite that, we still knew there was a chance that it wouldn't happen. And that
for me,
to it.
For me, it took me all the way back to 92 with the Rodney King trial. And like I shared with you before, I'm from Southern California, so I'm seeing this thing firsthand. And I remember being on the edge of our seats in school. I was in junior high at this time, and I remember them putting everything, locking down the city, and not knowing what was going to take place. And so watching this and knowing that what we did here in our area, how we stood up for, this didn't even happen around us, but we felt compelled to say, no, enough is enough, that we have to do this. And so for me as well, I was holding my breath, and I cried for about 3 hours. I'm not even gonna lie. Like I was drained, so emotionally drained afterwards. But I was very grateful. I was very fearful though, because we've been here before. We've been on the edge of our seats before, and we've all watched in horror, whether it be a video or countless witnesses, what have you, and it's still not going to the favor of the people or the family. So it was a huge sigh of relief. But like you all said, it's just a stepping stone, and that's why we're here right now. So I really, really appreciate your feedback on that. Thank you.
And Megan, I was going to comment, and you just said it. I was watching, the verdict itself, and I was watching some of the post interviews, and there were, demonstrations, but for the most part, everything was peaceful. And it was almost like nationally there was this sigh of relief that just you could feel it, in Facebook and Instagram and on the news. And, and so it was good to see that, at least in that moment, the decision that needed to be made was the right one. and everybody could just at least take a sigh of relief for a moment and reflect and figure out what the next steps are.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, that's excellent. So, Miss Tanya, you want to?
So, we just, truth and transparency, watching audience, we had a whole set of questions that we had talked about, but we also want to give opportunity to reflect on our community, the people that these men protect and serve every day. And I'm so grateful. I'm grateful that that didn't happen in our community. I'm grateful that that's not the conversation we're having. And so one of the questions that I was asked to ask during this conversation was, how do we continue to ensure the quality of our law enforcement officers and how we are protected and served in the Yuba County area, the Sutter County area? What kinds of things do you do to hold your officers accountable? And what can our community expect from you in terms of them being treated fairly and justly? And so if you'd like to speak to that, I think people would appreciate hearing that too.
First and foremost, I just want everybody to understand that this is our community too, and our families reside here. When an officer pulls a person over, that could be our wife, that could be our family members, that could be my son or somebody else. So we get feedback continuously from the community about how our officers conduct themselves through the community. And that's the important first thing is what's happening right now is having an open communication, a system to give feedback. I know Megan has called me personally when she's had questions about an incident or the way something was handled. And it's just exchanging information, perspective from her side, from her friends, from just passerbys or calls that she got. For me to be able to tell her and articulate why we did what we did and to understand or come to an understanding of why things happen. And that's what needs to continue conversations.
Megan and I have had several conversations too as well. She's called me at the same time and, asked about certain things, and because you hear stuff out in the community, and then there's always another side of it as well. So we've been able to work really well together on that, on some of those instances, to be able to shed light on the whole big picture of, everything that happened. But, for me too, as well as, like Chief Landon was saying, this is our community. We live here, and we want everybody to be happy, and we want everybody to get along, and we want that feedback. And it's one of those things where, I always tell our officers, treat everybody like you want to be treated, because we're no different than anybody else. I mean, we took this profession and we swore the oath to protect and serve, and we need to provide that quality service to our residents, our constituents that are out there. And so when we look at the bigger picture like that, we send them to training. I mean, we send them to communication training. We send them to sensitivity training. We send them to de-escalation training, all these different types of trainings, mental health training, and so when we look at that, I mean, overall, even in-house, we have lots of meetings to kind of self-reflect and debrief certain things, so that way we can gather all the information we possibly can. So, and having open community conversations like this with all of us together here, but then through our community policing, through our other community meetings, Coffee with a Cop and all that other stuff, it just opens that forum up so we can get, constant feedback.
And just to add some of the, sorry, Damien.
It's okay.
Some of the procedures that we have in place also. So we have a complaint procedure, and we take very seriously. If we receive a complaint from the member of the public, we investigate it fully, and then we reach a conclusion, and we give our findings. But not only that, every use of force that we have a use of force review. So it's documented, and that use of force is reviewed by people who weren't at the scene, but people looking from the outside, and to make sure that our training, our tactics are reasonable. We're using appropriate levels of force or no force, hopefully when necessary. But those processes are automatic, things that we do to police our officers, our deputies. But it goes back much deeper than that. It goes back to hiring the right individuals, and we try to really, really hire quality individuals. And the vetting process that we use is pretty tough, quite honestly. And I think that's the first step in getting rid of those individuals that we don't want in our field, is to make sure that we're all doing thorough background investigations, very complete background investigations. So there's accountability for me and for Brandon every 4 years, also in an election. And it's not because of that, but I was born and raised in this community. I love this community, and I want what's best for this community. And putting a product out there for public safety is very important to me, and they are representing my office when they're out there. So, the level of accountability is high.
I just want to add, for me, the message starts with me, and the accountability starts with me. So my message is clear. What I expect from all the officers to treat every person they come in contact as if that was their family member. We don't know. There's a high probability when we come in contact with our community members, this is their worst day. So we need to have a little bit of empathy and a little bit of understanding of what they're going through, and just take a deep breath and take a step back when that time calls for it, and just try to help them through whatever situation they may be involved in. And even though I send out my message, I am still continuously following up with the guys to make sure they are doing the right thing and treating our community well, or as they should. When a complaint comes in, like Wendell said, I handle every complaint. If you have a complaint, it comes straight to me, and I'll give you a call back, and I'll meet with you, and we'll discuss everything that happened and why it happened, and kind of go from there and figure out what the next steps would be with that, and where that's going to lead to. So that's all I got to say about it.
Yeah, and then if I can add, I want to kind of expand on what Wendell touched on a little bit, and I apologize if I'm long-winded. Somebody go ahead and mute me from your guys' end, but I think it's important for the viewers to know and understand that not every state has the same level of training. And so sometimes, we'll get asked our opinion about things that occur outside of California. And it's really hard to, understand, well, what is their training? How much training do they get? What do they emphasize in training? But California has some of the highest standards in the country. So for our officers, they all have to go to a basic police academy, which is about 6 months of training. And then they have to go through an extensive background process. And that background is run through basically the peace officer standards of training. They have a playbook that you have to go by. And it touches on a lot of those things Wendell had mentioned, but it goes beyond that. I mean, financial records, checking with your neighbors, checking with past employers. You have to go through an extensive psychological evaluation. You have to go through, obviously, a medical evaluation. And so in some cases, even a polygraph examination. And that's just to get your foot in the door and make sure that you're, of good character and, ethically, grounded. And then you still have to go through individual department training, which is another 4 months of actually in the field training, riding with seasoned officers. And you go through all of that before you get, to go out on your own. And then the state requires ongoing training for perishable skills, your pursuit tactics, your use of force tactics, CPR, first aid, all those things that you would expect. There's ongoing training requirements that we have there. And so, by the time somebody gets 2 years into their career, they've had extensive training, but it's always ongoing. I'm still learning things today, 25 years into this career. And so, it's a life commitment to making yourself better as an officer and as a community member.
Awesome. Thank you, gentlemen. That's good to know, because especially Sheriff Barnes or Brandon, like you shared when we were in our conversation before, California, we don't sometimes take that into consideration that, all these states are different. All the training is different. I think we kind of put a blanket over law enforcement and say, you guys are all trained the exact same way. You all have the same policies. You all go by the same book. And that's not the case. Right. So I think that is very important for our community to know and understand. So I just wonder, we see in the media, we all have Facebook, we all have media, we all have these outlets that we see there seems to be a difference the way officers handle situations with Black and brown citizens over how things are happening. Like, we're trying to understand how the difference comes into play. Like, is there any type of, I don't want to say necessarily racial profiling, but that's what it seems like for us on this end. But is there any type of training that says, okay, these type of people fit a certain description, these handle these people a certain way? Because we're trying to understand how white citizens with automatic weapons can be arrested with no issue, but Black citizens unarmed get killed. So it's kind of like, what's going on here? and I know you can't answer it for everyone, but just out of your heart and just out of being in the position that you are in, what do you think that is about? Do you think media is playing us into thinking that this is happening more to us than it is? Or is this absolutely taking place more? You know, is there a different way that Black and brown citizens are being handled than white citizens?
Well, this is a huge topic, right, Megan? I mean, there's so many different directions we can go. But the one thing I'll say is it is tough, like you said, to, just kind of throw a blanket statement out there, because every situation has to be analyzed individually. So I guess in all fairness, I'll start by saying it's very hard to do that. I will tell you that, the state has taken steps, to start kind of trying to identify some of those trends. There's the RIPA report, which you can find online. And as of this year, all the agencies in California are required to report contact information, reason for stop, ethnicity, and there's a whole litany of things that you have to answer. And so, what that report showed, based on some of the initial data, was that, contacts with Caucasian people actually did outnumber any other ethnicity, almost double. But when you look at it and you start breaking down other things, African Americans were searched far more frequently, right? So that's a good indicator of an area where maybe we need to start being a little bit more mindful and trying to get to the kind of the root of why that is. So there's a lot of room for, I guess, discussion there and trying to further enhance our training. But like I will kind of mention, POST, which regulates our training, they do have a required 2-hour block of racial ethnicity and racial profiling class that you have to go through.
Okay. Does anybody else want to kind of add into that?
Yeah, I would like to just throw in a little bit here. I think a lot of it comes down to, we would like to match our demographics in a police department, law enforcement agency, to the community. And that's something that we work towards, but you'll notice it's not happening, especially in this area and different, the Sikhs are much more prevalent in our society, in our culture here. It's a very big part of Yuba City, but you don't have the equal proportion or ratio that we do of other races. So I think a lot of it goes into some things that we need to improve on, and that's recruiting. And that's but how do you make this a popular career with everything that's going on right now? So we have to balance that. But I know that I feel, and I'm Japanese, so I'm half Japanese, and I feel very much more comfortable speaking to my mom's friends or somebody it's just that instant comfort, that instant recognition. We know we share the same culture and values and things. And I don't know if it's just that we're not, I grew up in a military family as well. So I was a lot more, it was more of a balance of everybody and being in different environments. And I think a lot of people sometimes get segregated in their areas, and that's their comfort level. So I would like to see officer or ratios match up demographically. And that's something that we are trying to work on at our department. I'm sure the other law enforcement agencies are as well, but it's a matter of making this a good, popular decision to be an officer.
Very good. I like that. Anybody else want to chime in on that?
I mean, I think they covered it, Megan. It's, we try to match the demographics. I mean, we've got, several people or different ethnicities within the community, and you want to try to be able to augment your department to be able to be reflective of that as well. And it's about the recruitment that side of it, and how do we make the profession enticing with all this going on. But even this, all pay and everything else, competing against each other too on this Zoom with with the same pool of candidates, and so we're all trying to say, hey, come work for us, and we're all fighting for the same group of people. And so these guys can be tough at times, and so we're all pulling everybody in which direction. But it's just trying to match that up. But then also, I guess when you look at that too, is in our community policing concepts, it's establishing those community partners out there and having people or groups within community watch groups within all of our neighborhoods, and that way you're getting that constant feedback. So if you hear of that being a concern, then you can be able to look at it farther and talk about it with those groups and kind of bring them in. And that's why we do citizen academies, to bring people in to show them like what we do on our end and answer some of those questions like that. So I don't know that, it's hard, like Brandon was saying, you got to go case specific by specific, but we train them the same across the board, and that's just to treat everybody equally. So
I wanted to jump in really quickly, and just because you're speaking, Chris, I want to thank you for coming. I know that because you had a time constraint this evening, you will have to jump off a little early. So I want to take the opportunity to thank you now. We're at 6:30, so I'll be the timekeeper. And I know you have to go in a few minutes. So we appreciate you staying on with us for as long as you could tonight.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for having me. So
absolutely.
I wanted to just jump in there real quick and just talk just very briefly about not necessarily what these other gentlemen have talked about, and maybe not answering the question, but just to talk about our need to be more. So we're very diverse, and our world is diverse, our country is diverse, but we don't have those interactions with the other cultures that we need to have. So there are subtle differences that we need to be aware of. And that's why partnerships with other members of different ethnicities within our community is so important. I value time talking to you ladies. I learn something every time I talk to you ladies. And, we need more of that. We need more interaction. We need positive interaction with all of the groups within our community. And it doesn't always happen. And I think it's because we are so dang busy responding to calls for service. We've lost that ability to be community police that we want to be. We want to interact with the community, and that's what we're striving to get back to. But I know I didn't answer your question, but I think that's a huge step. We need to do that. We need that interaction.
I'm sorry, Megan. I'm glad you said that, Wendell, because, now that the world is opening back up again, the Village Yuba-Sutter was birthed during COVID, right? So we are just getting our feet underneath us, but we have a plethora of activities and events that are going to really harness the energy of community and bring people together in just the way that you said. And so we look forward to those opportunities where you can come out and connect and eat food and listen to music and do the things that let us really stand together. And so those things are all coming. And so I'm excited to hear you say that, because we want that too, very much.
Yeah, no,
absolutely.
I want to compliment Megan, and I don't know if it's necessary to maybe kind of reiterate this for some of the listeners, but you and I kind of had a conversation about the badge and what that means, right? And we had, when you explained to me what the badge means to a certain part of the African American culture, and how that was used in slavery to go out and round up slaves, I had no idea that that's what the badge meant to a certain person. To me, the badge was always a sense of pride and something that was to be honored, and that's how I was raised. And not that that's good or bad. I just had no idea there was a different perspective in the world or in our country about what that meant. And so until you brought that to my attention, and I'm so much more sensitive to that now, and cautious and mindful of it. And to Wendell's point, I just think those conversations need to happen so that we can be educated and learn from other members of the community.
Absolutely. I feel like the history is such a huge part of our healing, because you don't know those things, and these are things that are not taught in our school system anymore. And unless you're taking classes at the college, or an African American class, or African American history class or something, you're not going to know those things. But as the Black community, trauma is real, for anyone, and there's triggers for all of those things. So for those of us who know the history, or even don't necessarily consciously know the history, but subconsciously we do, our spirit does, and we're reminded of these things that are traumatic to us. So the smallest thing, like the honor, your badge is honorable to you, for us it triggers for us, and like I explained to you gentlemen before, absolutely, policing came from policing the Black community. It wasn't about protecting and serving the white community. It was about policing us and keeping us in line. So the history and the attitude and the aggression that comes from the Black community, it's not necessarily something that is conscious. It's conscious and subconscious. It's spiritual and physical. It's all of those things for us. So when these things take place, at one time we were all on this big old thing called a plantation together, and we watched these atrocities take place right there in that little piece of land, and we had to stay in that little piece of land and go through the trauma, go through the grief, go through the thing. Now we're in wider borders. The plantation done got bigger, and that's what it feels like for us. For Black Americans, it feels like, okay, the borders are off. We can kind of live wherever we want to, but we still have to be mindful that not everybody feels the same way about us. Not everybody has that love in their heart, and not everybody views their badge honorably like you do. Not everybody has the respect for the community in that fashion. So for us as the Black community, and like we discussed before, the science of generational trauma, we're going through generational trauma. As you can see, just even in the day that the guilty verdict comes out of George Floyd, we have a young lady who's shot at 16 years old calling for help. We don't know exactly all the details, but the body cam has already came out. And the excessive force against us is what we're trying to get people to understand. The excessive force against us isn't necessary. Like, we will comply, we will do what's necessary just like anyone else. But the excessiveness and the justification of excessive force against us, that is a doctrine that comes all the way back again to slavery. Nobody, and like what we talked about in qualified immunity, that came in because women slave owners were so vicious to the children, so vicious to their slaves, that they had to give them immunity for killing their slaves. So they protected the slave master's wife versus the slave. So these principles may not be written out in stone, or may not be spoken, but they're still used in a lot of our major cities, a lot of our rural cities. And I give thanks that you gentlemen, since last year, you've been gracious, you've been respectful, you've been honorable to Tanya and myself and our families. And anytime, like you said earlier, anytime the community has called me and said, this has happened, this took place, or whatever, I've been able to call any one of you gentlemen. And Sylvester, I haven't had the opportunity to call you, but I go through Wheatland. I might have to call. But anytime I called someone and inquired about an arrest, inquired about something going on, you've always respectively given me the information that I needed to kind of process through this, or kind of understand, okay, is A, B, and C being done, and our T's being crossed and our I's being dotted. And so I give a lot of thanks for that. I appreciate the development of this relationship and the conversations that we're having now and that we're going to continue to have. And I'm grateful that the Village Yuba-Sutter is going to be a part of that process of change and that conversation, and hopefully that sensitivity training that comes forth into the different departments, so we can really get to the root of this and really heal with one another as the Black and brown community and law enforcement, and not be about, be separated by blue lives and Black lives. Be human lives. We're human. This is humanity. And this is a human issue. Yes, it involves Black folks, and it involves, officers, but we don't bleed blue. We bleed red, all of us, and we have to get to the point where we are no longer separated by our entities or separated by our cultures, but come together because we're humans, and this is humanity. And so That's all I have to say about that.
You know, Megan, I loved what you said, because when we talk about what happened in the historical perspective of where that comes from, where the genesis of that trauma, we also then, on the other hand, have mothers, we have fathers, we have children who are sharing those stories, and generationally, we are traumatized and scarred. So just like the history, Brandon, that you learned, there's also a history being passed down in the community of color that unfortunately is what keeps us safe. It's don't make eye contact. It's make sure you have your hands on the steering wheel, son. It's don't drive after 5 o'clock. It's do not wear a hoodie while you're driving because you'll be pulled over. It's all of these things, the conversations that we're having to have in our Black homes with our Black sons and daughters to pray to God in our mother's hearts, our father's hearts, that our babies are going to come home at night. That kind of trauma is real and it's paralyzing, but it also is stigmatizing because it perpetuates this us and them because there's no trust. Because just like you want to go home and take your uniform off, we want our babies to come home, our sons to come home, our daughters to come home too. And what's happening culturally is perpetuating that rift. So that culture shift that happens because we begin to have these conversations, like Megan said, will be tremendously healing once we kind of learn how to do this together, how to change some of this, and really address the root causes of what's happening in our communities.
You know, the good thing about California right now, they are really focused, California law enforcement, on de-escalation. Through post. That is a huge thing. I think they're going to make it mandated as part of our every 2-year training. So that's good for us. And I think the main thing in there is communication. You know, if we can learn to communicate with the person we're out with and have a conversation, it can more than likely de-escalate any use of force incident. And that's what California, that's what we as leaders right here are focused on right now. And I see change coming. I see things getting better in our state, and especially our area up here. So
good.
That's exciting. That's exciting news. Yeah. So anyone else have anything they'd like to add or let the community know? Go ahead, Chris.
No, one of the, when Tanya just kind of inspired the stop for me when she was just talking about what she said and, about having those conversations at home. And I find myself having the same conversations. I mean, I've got 2 daughters and 2 sons, but, I have the same type of conversations. It's like, okay, obey all the laws, do this, drive this, don't speed, don't look suspicious. I mean, we drive down the road and we see a cop behind us. What do? We all slow down. We're looking at our rearview mirror. We all put our hands up. I do it. I mean, especially when I drive through Yuba City and when Rob, no, I'm just kidding. But, things where we have the same conversations. And I just want to let you know that those conversations happen in our households too. But I get it's a different dynamic and I understand what you're saying. But so we kind of took the concept to the schools because that's our next generation, right? That's our future. Mm-hmm. Different ethnic groups in the school. When we go to T.E. Matthews to the school, and in a class that's called Stop by Cops, and you have conversations with them about what are their fears, and having them being able to explain it to us on what their fears are of when they're getting pulled over, and getting the dynamics and the concerns from each different ethnic group when they're giving us the feedback. And then we're like, okay, it's our turn. Well, these are all the things going through our head, and this is what we're fearful of when we're making that stop. And then it opens that dialogue, right? And then they understand, or they try to understand where we're coming from, and we understand where they're coming from. And it's just like that mutual dialogue, because we all have concerns. Some of them are the same concerns, and some of them are like, totally like, way out left or way out right, but they're still concerns, right? And so it's one of those things where, we've tried to incorporate that as well, but it all goes back to communication, right? You just got to take that big, deep breath and go take it case by case and move forward with it. And so, appreciate you bringing that up, Tanya, because you and I have talked about that quite a bit as well, right? About those conversations that and stuff. And, it's paramount as we move forward to continue conversations and build upon those. So
I appreciate the heart of what you're saying, Chris. And I do. The only thing that I would add to that, though, is that instantly when a Black child is seen, they're not necessarily given the benefit of the doubt of being a Black child in certain circumstances. And I'm not saying this about anyone on this panel, but I am saying that we've seen evidence that Black children, Black people generally, the responses are swifter, they're different. And so, yes, we may have similar conversations just as parents, or, parents who love their children. Yes, but I also think that it's an honest assessment that for our children in the street being observed, it's pretty swift. Justice in the minds of certain law enforcement folks is pretty swift in what they think they're going to do, how they think they're going to respond, and that's part of what's led us to some of these conversations is what happens out in the street. So I'm grateful for you all and your perspective and how you deal with the community and that very precise stance that you take on how you deal with people and what's right and what's wrong, because unfortunately in other communities it isn't so.
I'm glad that we have the leadership group that we have here that's on the screens today with all the law enforcement leaders within the Bi-County region, because I mean, we've all known each other a long time, and it's one of those things, and we all work really well together, and we talk, communicate a lot. And, we're all there to rely on each other. And when we look at, the overall aspect of things, it's, on that communication side, right? And it's us setting that example for our troops, our deputies, our officers and stuff like that, and continuously communicating with them to ensure they understand the concerns of the community that they might not be aware of. And having that, whether it's a briefing training or whether it's going out and writing with the officers or going out to those community groups or reaching out to, the two sheriffs or the other chiefs and saying, what are you guys experiencing and stuff like that. That open dialogue right there. And then also, the Village Yuba-Sutter and just all of our other groups that we meet with. I think it's pretty phenomenal about the relationships that we have within our community, because we can have those open conversations and we can learn from it. We take it back and then we start. And so you don't see, at least I haven't seen it, we don't see those issues here like we've seen in other places where it's that swift action and somebody's being judged by this. And so there you go. And next thing you know, there's that body cam and, we're having the harsh, right? And I think that's just because we continuously are out there trying to improve our people and set that example and let them know what those community concerns are and keep on that, being active in the community, being active as a leadership group. And I think, I think we've made great strides there. So from where we came from locally 15 to 20 years ago to where we're at now, I think we've taken some great strides on that. So, my hat's off to them as well. So, and to you guys for what you're doing as well. And just all the doors that this opens up for us to build upon as we continue to move forward. So those are my parting thoughts. I love you guys to pieces, that. And it was great seeing you guys tonight. Thanks for having me. But I got to run to my other commitment. So you're in good hands with all these guys.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chris.
Well, this has been a wonderful conversation. I'll say that for sure.
Yes,
I kind of wanted to go back and touch on something that Damien and I know Chris kind of touched on as well. And that's the police academy itself. And so I think, Chris is an instructor out there, as am I. And one of the things I actually teach out there is the use of force instructional block for the police academy. Now, it has to do a lot with the case law and even some of the recent changes in law about de-escalation. That's all part of the curriculum. So I don't teach the actual, like, how to use a baton, how to use pepper spray, how to use a firearm. Those are all other instructors, but I teach the block on when it's appropriate to use those things. And so, that does give me a little bit of buy into the next generation of law enforcement, as it does, Chris, and I know Wendell taught out there before as well. And so, I just want to kind of reassure you guys that, we're trying to back up some of, the things that we're saying by investing in the next generation of law enforcement. Yeah. And then also beyond that, to a point that I think Damien made, which is, the first thing that I tell these guys is, you won't use your baton every day. You will not use your pepper spray every day. In fact, I hope you never have to. The one thing you will do every day is you will talk to people. So get good at it, because that is how you will start developing rapport with people and trying to get to the root of, what the issue is or how you can help that person move through whatever problem they're dealing with in that moment is, through good, effective communication. So that's, my opening comments to them is always get good at talking, because you're going to do it every day of your life as long as you're in this profession.
Nice.
And I wish, just piggyback on one thing. I wish, because my first 10 years, I was a correctional officer in a jail. I wish every single police officer would have to work 2 years in the jail to begin their career, because you learn to communicate with people who are in custody. And you take that out into the streets, and it just makes you a better person.
I agree with that. I think that because I've been in the medical field for 20 years, and I worked as a CNA for a lot of those years. And I would always say the nurses who were CNAs before they were nurses were phenomenal nurses. They understood what the CNAs went through. They understood how to do patient care. Nurses who did not do that and just became nurses one day, they were very arrogant. They were not as, their bedside manner was not as good as the nurses who had CNA training. They just were different type of people. They weren't the quality nurses like the ones who had came up from the ranks and did some time being working as a CNA. You know anything about CNA work, honey? It's the grunt of medical, but it is needed. It's the CNA is the lifeline to the patient for the nurse. So I think that's wonderful to think that you need to start in a different field first before you hit the streets, because it does form you on how to deal with people. It does give you a different perspective on how to, in my field, take care of people and be a more effective nurse or doctor or whatever it is that you're training to be, medical assistant. So I'm grateful for my CNA time, because it made me a better medical assistant and it made me aware of better nurses and better doctors. So I think that would be awesome if people, would take the steps to be a CO or any of the other steps that would give you more one-on-one training with people. I think that's awesome. Absolutely.
So Megan, I was going to ask, did you know that CO was correctional officer, or have you just been hanging out with us too much?
No, I'm a smart girl.
We'll have you using all the codes by the end of this conversation.
Well, I do have a cousin that's a CO too.
Okay.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
So
okay,
I was going to say we're almost at 7 o'clock. And we generally try to, keep these conversations about an hour. You've been very generous with your time, and your candor is refreshing, and we can just feel how much you care for the community, and your commitment to this work we're just grateful, and we're thankful for that. We would love to have you back.
I will have you.
Yes, absolutely. I just think that, inviting folks in to have these conversations, it's one of the reasons that we started this with the Village Yuba-Sutter, because we wanted people to feel safe to talk, disagree, agree, to just really, have good open dialogue. And we're going to continue this series of community conversations. So again, thank you for your participation this evening. And gosh, we just pray over you, your families, your officers, and we pray the same hedge of protection for you all that we pray for ourselves as you work in our communities.
And thank you for your relationship and your time. And Chief Landon, I know that we know that you'll be retiring from us soon, so we still invite you to the conversation at any time you want to come and talk with us. You're still a part of this, so we appreciate you guys a lot. And thank you once again. this relationship wouldn't have formed had you guys not said, hey, we're here and we want to have a conversation with you. So thank you for taking that first step and stepping out with us. And you know, Chris, I know he just stepped off, but had he not said that I'm willing to stand with you, you know, I'm willing to walk with you, we wouldn't be here right now. It would have been a different conversation. And so, again, we appreciate what you're doing and what you continue to do, and your relationship that you have with us, and the work that we're trying to do of mending the fences between the Black and brown community and law enforcement. So we have a happy and whole community, and, you know, just really become a tight, Yuba-Sutter can absolutely, and Wheatland could absolutely be the change that the world needs to see. We're just powerful enough to do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You ladies are amazing, and I truly do appreciate talking to you. I look forward to our conversations, and, you know, and we need to start having conversations about how do we change, how do we affect change, and you know, hopefully we'll get there. But we need to start. We need to start doing that. We need to start.
That could be the topic of our next conversation, Sheriff.
whatever it takes. Let's do it.
You
Okay.
two are amazing, and thank you both for like inviting us in and just hosting this. Thank you. I appreciate it.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much for your two ladies' leadership. You know, we are peers in all of this. We're all equals. And you know, as you mentioned, Chris, and you two ladies have kind of been, you know, a very good and refreshing source to pull us all together. So thank you.
Okay, so thank you once again for everyone joining us. This was the Village Yuba-Sutter's Community Conversation. We were joined with our wonderful Sheriff, Brandon Barnes, Chief of Police of Yuba City, Rob Landon, Yuba County Sheriff, Wendell Anderson, Chief of Police, Damien Sylvester, and our Chief of Marysville Police, Christian Sachs. He had to step off a little early, but he was right here with us in the conversation. We thank each and every one of you guys for being a part of this conversation, being a part of this community, and serving us in the way that you do. We thank Yuba College once again for their partnership. We thank Crystal for being our technician tonight, and we look forward to putting this on our social media outlets. Look for it on Facebook and the Village Yuba-Sutter page. If you haven't liked it yet, go ahead and do that. And we just want to say thank you for joining us once again, and we'll see you next month for another community conversation. Life, love, and blessings.